Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to Formidable Fridays, proudly brought to you by Impact South Africa. For the past few months, we've been hosting a series of conversations where we engage in consequential dialogue on enterprise supply development, as well as corporate social investment, as it relates to the impact of the economy and its various sectors and stakeholders. My name is Vuyolwethu Dubese, an innovation consultant and moderator of today's conversation, where over the next hour, we've invited a prolific voice in enterprise supply development across one of the largest banks in Africa. Today's dialogue will be mapping the context of the current state of the sustainability of ESD, as well as transformation policies that go beyond broad-based Black economic empowerment. The conversation will also explore the convergence of the impact and risk that the COVID-19 pandemic has had on supply chain economics, and taking the capital of this conversation to task and looking at future fit solutions across stakeholder management and engagement. Ladies and gentlemen, without wasting any further time and getting straight into the day's conversation, please help me welcome Mr. Vusi Fele, the Chief Procurement Officer of the Absa Group, bringing to the discussion the sage expertise and knowledge spanning more than 2 decades with specialization in supply chain, supplier transformation, as well as localization strategies. So we indeed are in very formidable hands. Vusi, a gracious welcome to the Formidable Fridays. A pleasure to have you with us today.
Vuyolwethu and Impact SA, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you and just foster the dialogue on this Formidable Friday. And also greetings to all the Formidable Friday citizens.
Absolutely. Well, it is definitely a pleasure to have you with us. And before we engage in the depth of the 3 key elements that I've mentioned earlier on the sustainability, the risk, the impact that's been brought forth by the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as facing forward with future fit solutions in relation to ESD, let's set the context of this topic. When we engage in ESD, what exactly do we mean? And what is so unique about this business model, as well as its relationship to South Africa's past and its economic past, its present, as well as the future?
Yeah. Well, the topic of ESD, right, was not birthed or brought to life by the political climate of South Africa. ESD in the main is a business brainchild, because if you look at enterprise and supply development, most of supply development, but these two in terms of enterprise development and supply development are integrally linked in the value chain. But let's go back and roll the time a little bit to history. If you look just post the Second World War, where after all the damage that has been done to human society, but people had to live, and industrialization had to take forth. I want to just pick up one example from that era, where in Japan, Toyota specifically identified supply development as a differentiator and a building block for them to successfully recover from that crisis by picking up suppliers or value chain partners who are providing either innovation, providing goods and services, providing expertise and capability, which is not normally found in entities that are inwardly focused. So then Japan identified that Toyota had to identify that they had to work closely with their input partners, which is in terms suppliers, and then work with them on an individual basis to ensure that, one, they can unlock their potential within those partners, which are called suppliers, and then develop them to understand the business model of Toyota, so that the two can then put together expertise and come up with a greater product. So supplier development and enterprise development, once it fuels economic co-ops, but more also it's a selfish differentiation model to have an ante on your competitors. That's for me the genesis of ESD and why, therefore, we should be serious in dealing with ESD as a business model and as a strategy, and then not charity as what we've seen so far, and also not as a political tool, but it helps the policy makers to deliver practically on their policy intents.
Absolutely, and we're going to get into your thoughts on that, because across the year you've also provided some thought leadership on the value of ESD and it not being a charity case, as you mentioned, but it really is about delivering value across all stakeholders who are involved. And I want to go back to particularly the impact of it this year. I mean, I think it would be amiss of us to not mention the unpredictability of this pandemic. You mentioned in an article that when a number of supply chain reports were released pre-COVID-19, business leaders, they listed risks such as technology, even global climate change, data breaches as their main concerns, and a global pandemic didn't feature on anyone's radar. And I think it's really shown to an extent how ill-prepared that we were for risk, and across various economies as well as sectors. And in your engagement with the various partners and clients who are a part of the value chain, how has the response within the ESD ecosystem been when we're engaging on risk mitigation as well as investor and sector confidence?
Yeah, I think every business, right, has a risk mitigation strategy, and you work with different variables and stimuli within your modeling of risk, right? As I said, we've seen a lot of global pandemics, global risk, adverse risk impacts, right, that has come forth. But in terms of what 2020 brought forth for us was then a different lens of another risk variable, which then talks to things that a business would not normally build in at that depth or length or breadth and depth of risk mitigation. However, I believe that the reason why we can, even though the economy and business impact has been severe, and especially to the small entity, developing entities, has been that the magnitude, because this pandemic has not just been isolated to a geography or isolated to a portion of the value chain, but it has been quite an international global pandemic that hits everybody at the same level, at the same time, but also stress testing the preparedness thereof, right? So what we've seen in terms of making sure that businesses then had to then say we plug in now maybe risk strategy number C that we never thought of. So what that means, even for me, for every entrepreneur and every business, no matter how small or big, you ought to have a risk mitigation strategy, having done your assessment of the market, your assessment of your internal capabilities, and then have a plan to say if this happens, you play with your what ifs, right? But I think the what ifs were not broad enough to think that we can have a risk event that affects the global community at the same level. Where then, and if we think back in terms of the build up to this risk, we can see in some other regions there's been debates of nationalism, inwardly focusing even the supply chains, right, and business development and economic development, right. But then I think that was in a way the universe, right, and the creator telling us we need to prepare for some event that's going to come up. But we use that as a political tool than thinking beyond what we see. Right. So we've seen companies that, if you look at in terms of our own domestic market, we've seen how then through various instruments, then even the government has responded to try and preserve, because again, it shows that yes, we had some kind of a war chest to address this risk, but I think the depth of this pandemic has found us wanting.
Absolutely. I think, it's definitely stretched our capacity. And as you mentioned, the stresses of how we could innovate. And we've seen that with startups, we've seen that with new ideas coming forth, and even in dialogues such as these, in terms of the true value in having such consequential conversations. Now, I want to
maybe just as a last point on that, in terms of applying the risk lens in our topic, right? That aspect, which may be one of the questions we'll ask down the line, but let me address it here amongst others. Risk is part of our business life, is part of our individual lives, right? So we should accept risk and the positive energy that the risk drives us to be creative, to be innovative, but to be prepared. But one can never be 100% prepared. It's our response to risk and our preparedness that makes the impact manageable. If you're not prepared, like we've seen that almost around the globe, and even in our space domestically in South Africa, almost 50% of the SMMEs and small businesses have not survived this pandemic because most of them were found unprepared, and most even of some of the benefactors of ESD were found not prepared, which is what then makes, I think, the Absa program in terms of what we're trying to do different, to say we've prepared many variables, but in terms of our engagement with these entities has been from a business mindset than in charity. Because charity, you just give money away or you give resources away. You don't care of the consequences. For us, and for me specifically as a visionary when leading this function at Absa, has been that it's not charity's business. Therefore, we must prepare for the unexpected all the time.
So perhaps as we've accelerated the conversation into the element of risk, particularly the effectiveness of decisions of mitigating risk, decisions of being prepared, and I think it'd be fair to say that the private sector has been at the epicenter of the pandemic, and particularly financial institutions have been primarily so far for not only businesses but individuals alike. And as you've brought in Absa in this conversation, what has been the gravitational decision at Absa, particularly in your ESD programs and procurement endeavors, and in the investment responding to this epidemic? As you've rightfully mentioned, that we've had a couple of SMEs that have, one, either shut down, two, either pivoted, or three, expanded their offering in how they were initially perhaps triggered in the conversations and in the relationships within ESD programs in Absa. And also, secondly, whether this has affected the bank supply chain diversification towards these three elements of SMEs and startups coming to task.
Yeah, Vuyolwethu, I'll take it back to you in a way. I remember one of your talks, you spoke, and I think you're a big advocate of using data and big data for decision making. Right? At Absa, everything that we do is premised and founded on data-led decision making. So data is quite important, and converting information to knowledge and insights. There's a lot of information all around us, but I think where we lack as people, and also maybe as startups and even businesses at large, is making sure we use the right information, transfer that to knowledge and insight, and therefore be able then to either have predictive decision making or reactive decision making, which is a component of risk management of its own, right? So in Absa specifically, when we have been building up this program since the gazetting of the Financial Services Sector Code, right, and then understanding our procurement landscape and understanding our own business, it led us to be targeted in our approach towards supporting developing businesses or SMMEs in collective, right? And making sure that when our interventions are informed by the data we have at hand and insights that we build, that we need to put forward, and then help the same community to understand then that in some of our decisions that we've taken in terms, if I look at our response to this pandemic, both from a business perspective, which I will not talk at large, but to just link it to what my competency area is. We have at large as Absa responded to with more than 900 million of relief towards this debt, but working with partners and government in this space in terms of the solidarity fund for businesses to have access to relief mechanisms in our own space. And they said, as we focused on then, if I turn to the SME support from the procurement program perspective, we ensure that, which is why our program, I think, has become successful from the time of engaging an SMME. It's a long-term view, right? And also understanding, drilling down to gaps that we need to plug in as we work with that SME in terms of homologating them into our own space. And working with the Absa business fundamentals. So I think that has helped us then, as you have seen also with, I think, with attestation from the 4 cohorts that you've interviewed who are participating in our program, what has made them successful. All of that was not just a dream or just a fluke in the wake up in the morning, I need to do that. It's because of using data and making then proper decisions to support.
Absolutely. Data and intelligence is something that is quite important in the work that I do. So I want to go back to and still stick on the theme on the endeavors that Absa has taken to the success as well as the effectiveness of these programs. And one of them is the recent Absa and Business Day Supplier Development Awards. And in it, you had mentioned that, there absolutely is no doubt that supporting entrepreneurships through corporate supply chains gives all stakeholders, as well as corporates, particularly the material benefits to local development and transformation, and is therefore good business. And it's good business for all involved, right? Yeah. And in corporate seeing the value for ESD, what are the true requirements that you would say that corporates need to meet in order to execute these effective ESD programs for small business suppliers?
Yeah, Vuyolwethu, with regard to designing ESD programs, right, it has to start from the top in terms of ensuring that your policy and the program are intertwined. And understanding, I think for me, it's driven from a point of this being a strategic lever for Absa to be differentiated in this market and to bring shareholder value for all stakeholders, because suppliers are part of our stakeholders and they contribute to Absa's share price, they contribute to Absa's sustainability, they contribute to citizenship as Absa in the different operations to work in. So as part then of making sure that we've got long-term customers, you need, as you design your ESD program, you cannot design it as on the side or of the desk. You must have a deliberate program, well-resourced, with clear linkage to your business strategy. If it's not linked to a business strategy, then it's easy to switch it off. Right? That's why for me, I'm blessed that in the spaces over the 2 decades that you've mentioned of my career, thank God for that, I bless my creator for that, I've been blessed that every organization I've worked in, they gave me the freedom to understand the impact of my universe and how then that links to a strategy. But I think I also will ask them of the leader to have the right vision that is linked to the business vision. Because if these two are not meeting, you've got a problem in your hands. So my advice to to both the boards of any corporate, take supplier development and ESD as a direct contributor to your strategy. Because in the main procurement, I think, which is one of the things which I think it links to this discussion, in the main procurement contributes to the EBITDA, right? Your operational profit in terms of costing and cost reductions, fetching innovation from partners externally. So therefore, when you have configured procurement in the right way and not just as a clerical function, and see procurement as a strategic delivery agency, you will then find yourself in the space that Absa is finding itself today because of our programs being intertwined. And if I can just confirm for you, part of our strategic tenets at Absa is shaping society, right? And contributing positive to society, which is a strategic tenet. And that's where then myself and my team in group procurement, we find a resonance in that strategic tenet, and we'll bring this to life through our programs, both from supplier landscape enablement, but then within that, making sure that we are aware and are part of a global citizenship in South Africa as a community itself, right? So because I don't know, for me to walk the streets and meet you in the supermarket, right? Let's say Woolies, which I think you love. Sorry to mention a name, but it's what I don't feel shy of standing up and talking about my organization, because I know that what we're doing is linked not just from a profit point of view, but it's linked to us as a living organism of the society. So that's why for me, I think the strategy, therefore, and business strategy must be built around those pillars.
And I think that this could be perhaps our next conversation, but the true essence of creating shared value. And I think, you know, when we're talking about impact and when we're talking about the components of including design thinking in your strategy, these are the kinds of not only outputs, but the outcomes that we definitely can look forward to. And I want to stick to the theme of roles and responsibility within the sector. And we've covered the element of what the corporate needs on their end in order to be effective and to scale and to grow and become fruitful. But what about the SME? Because when they come to Absa, they also need to be prepared. They need to have their ducks in a row. So how do they, what are some elements, what are components that they need to keep in mind in identifying the right ESD program for their business?
Yeah, thank you so much, Vuyolwethu. I'm glad that now we're bringing the total value chain into scope. Let me start this way, right? As you know, that the whole supply development ESD industry, I think now it is circa 37 billion rand worth of business. Just think about it. From the time the policy was promulgated, we've built a 37 billion rand worth of an industry. But then we still today are sitting, sitting being challenged that we don't see the impact of supply development. I think one of the points that talks to the role of an SMME, which I want to cover it in 4 C's, right? 4 C's. One is, for an SMME, you need to understand, you need to be committed, with the first C, to your business vision. Why do you as an SMME exist? I'll tell you why. An entrepreneur's makeup is to solve problems in areas where it's not core for me as a chief procurement officer for the bank and for the bank, right? So that I can reach out to you as Vuyolwethu and say, you've got this expertise, but then be committed on your value offering in terms of what you offer me in terms of my problem. Because when I issue an RFP, I'm telling you I've got a problem. And I'm telling you that I don't have either the time nor capability to do it myself. So I depend on you. So then the second C that I coined this morning was communication. The role of how do you communicate your value offering as a business? But communication is both ways. It's about trust. So before I go to roles and responsibility, but that's really past here, it's about trust, because you communicate that you've got the capability. You're telling me I must trust you. That's why then you need to articulate your business plan and your value offering in that way. If you run to agencies that help you to write your business plan, they must write it in your own language, not in their language, which what I've seen in my practice, that you have an SME coming in front of you offering you a product or service, but they cannot articulate it because somebody wrote it for them. So it must be part of you. So then the fourth C for me, that C that I wrote on is now be consistent in your delivery. Be consistent in your delivery, because that will then open the doors for you. But be consistent in the makeup of your organization. Today, don't be supplying me with stationery. Tomorrow, you're supplying me with data scientists. I cannot link the two, because if I look at your capability, I can't see you transcending from a general dealer to a specialist field like a data scientist. Sorry, you're not consistent. But then the other question is about you. Once you come into the space of your role and delivery, you then show us that you understand your quality, and also in terms of your response mechanism, in terms of your remediation, but in terms of your timeliness, etc., etc. These three, for me, communication, commitment, consistency, the formula is equal to currency. Then you always be able to access bigger businesses. Now, if I look at the roles, right, if we quickly close on the roles, SME's role is to understand that they are also, as I said earlier, being back to the other C, which is called charity. As an SME, you are not chasing charitable profit. You add value, which translates to then customers, which translate then to your company being sustainable, right? So define the space you work in, define your abilities, and stay in your lane. Then for the agencies that supports SME development, which I'll talk about this 36 billion industry, this 6 billion rent industry, your role is not either to steal IP, is to be a supporting mechanism for this entity that you're investing time in, right? Using your expertise, right? It's like being a mother to a child. Your role is not to change that child, but your role is to unearth the innate ability and potential of that business, and then see it grow and support it grow. But what you've seen in which I'm not teasing, but I'm speaking what I see, what is practical, and what we've seen happening, that some of the supply development agencies, they confuse their roles. They want to compete with the very same SME that they are trying to support.
Absolutely.
And then policymakers make sure that when you write policy from the union buildings, the policy is based on understanding how practical that policy is, and then stand back and allow the embedment. And your job is to then course correct, which is also my role as a leader. I layered my vision, and the team then works with me in a collaborative manner to even show the other principles that I've not seen, allow practice to happen. So I think I'm crying out for us as in the value chain to understand our roles and not confuse our roles.
And then understanding our roles, and you mentioned something that is quite important in this, and this is the ethics of industry. And there's billions, as you've mentioned, that is circulating within this particular economy. And however, it doesn't always translate to particularly the growth of small businesses and ultimately the growth of South Africa's economy. And when we speak to ESD, it's not only a developmental strategy, as you rightfully mentioned, but we're also talking about transformation. And I want to come to the point of governance, and particularly with the triple BEE policy, it being this policy that's attempting to redress inequality equality. And now, it's become this commercialization of either the Black identity or minorities, which are on the scorecard that agencies or corporates can exercise in them being this tick box exercises. And we've seen this with falsified ownership or even silent and dormant Black partners. Ethical transformation and leadership. How do we maintain this? And particularly not only within corporate structure, but the other partners and the other stakeholders who do form part of this industry?
Yeah. Vuyolwethu, you touched quite a sensitive matter right there, right? That I think for me, it goes back to what we said earlier in terms of the ethics of transformation, but also the ethics of business at large, right? The fact that this industry has been born and grown to a 37 billion rand worth of a business from a ESD perspective and supporting program shows us the entrepreneurial mind, because entrepreneurs turn a non-value resource to a value resource. So I commend the industry for that. But however, in our doing, it's where I think there are fault lines. I think because of trying to, which is great, which is one thing in terms of ethics is challenged by great, the human composition. If I am not doing this from a point of purpose, I will always, right, be trying to short circuit the system for undue benefit. So for me, we must be purpose driven. What's our purpose, right? But also then talks to challenging if we don't, as an industry that does ESD, but as a whole, which is why I love my industry in procurement. I belong to the Chartered Institute of Purchasing and Supply globally, and also a leader in there differently. But it's because I think the conduct issues that we hold ourselves accountable for every action that we do, right? So I think for us to reverse unethical practice in transformation is to take away and identify those entities that are not linked to why we're doing transformation. In South Africa perspective, I think we do use transformation in the South African perspective, because supply development and minority development is not new to us, right? It's across the globe to support minorities. But I think it's in the makeup of the human beings that have lost purpose, that we find ourselves having societal problems. Let's bring it back to, I think if I talk about Ubuntu in the same space, I think I want to address you directly. If you think I'm sketching, I'm not sketching. If I talk about Ubuntu as a principle, whereby I know that as a procurement leader in Absa, when you come as Vuyolwethu and you have successfully shown your capability and you've won this contract, right? Not for me to say how can I then on the side work with you to gain undue money, right? So we need to address, I think for me in this topic as a whole, it is a macrocosm of the macro view of where we find ourselves in South Africa at this stage, right? Which we need to reverse corruption out of practice. But I think also the beneficiaries have got an answer, a question to answer. Because do you also as a participant, as an SMME, believe in your capabilities, believe in yourself. Don't ask the poor buyer, right, who's out there to favor you unethically, right? Because there's two in unethical practices. There are two components, right? The instigator and the responder to the instigation. So we need then to, I think for me as part of, if my small life contribute to the academia, say as part of us training in all our training modules, I think ethics should not feature only at third year or fourth year or become a selective. Ethics for me must become the mandatory program that we instigate across our education system, including from primary education. But more so, this thing must start at home, start with how I raise my kids, so that they can respond appropriately. Then we'll have then business people who say, by doing a wrong act or behaving unethically in terms of these supply programs, I must also understand the consequences and the impact thereof. Let's just look at one unrelated example with this metric rewrite now for physics and maths, right? One company that was appointed to help run the exam and distribution of papers, one individual did that. But now a million of kids' future is in the balance. So by understanding the consequences of unethical behaviors, I think it might just turn us around. That's why at Absa then our approach is making sure that people that we appoint in positions understand their accountabilities, but are tuned in to the values we all espouse. And as a leader, I wake up every day walking that walk and demonstrating that to everyone. So I'm calling upon the captains of ESD programs and the industry to start thinking how we engage in this space and act differently and call out situations that are unethical. I hope I've answered you.
You definitely have. And I think this is a call to action that speaks to everyone who is a part of this value chain. It's something that has been so integral and has been so vivid as well, because it definitely does impact the fragility of stakeholder engagement. So thank you so very much for that. And I think in bringing to task and seeing some of the ethical and innovative practices that Absa has brought to light, I think it, just to also lighten up the conversation, if you can share with us some of the initiatives. I know that Impact South Africa has done the incredible task of showcasing what true value and the shared value that Absa has created across the value chain that we've been speaking on with ESD programs that you have. But the transformation that Absa has had through its various programs for small and medium enterprises, and if you can provide a case study or two.
Yeah, well, Vuyolwethu, thank you so much. I think back in terms of the impact, right, of the programs that we do. If I look back in my tenure at Absa, I joined Absa in 2016 when we were dealing with separation, which I think will then maybe bring light to what we're trying to do. And as part of separating from Barclays PLC, had to find and redefine our contracting strategies to ensure that we've got local resources and local sources of supply, and more so in our supply chain, and also in terms of the value chain of Absa's delivery. And then I said, we deliberately then said about this program, we're not going to be everything to everyone. We're going to select suppliers that are complementary and challenging Absa throughout its whole value chain. So for each and every of the participants, both from the supply diversity program that we have at Absa and what we saw in the so-called, generally in the industry, developed suppliers, I sat with all of them and make sure they understand what objectives we've got in mind from a transformation point of view. Our program at Absa is premised on three tenets: transform, i.e. working with the established entities that are not transformed with regard to now Black economic empowerment, which is a kind of a business with a political slant, right? Then the middle pillar is grow, looking at SMMEs that are already in our space, right? But need to grow in terms of the depth of our business requirements. and supporting our core and strategic requirements for partners. Then the last leg is find and graduate, meaning those entrepreneurs, which are, if I look at the holistic ESD value chain, entrepreneurs that are not necessarily in our supply chain today, but are showing potential to grow and create jobs. For me, it's all going back to the National Development Plan, NDP, where also generally the role of SMEs that they play in job creation, that how they can contribute to the fiscal. How can they contribute, SMEs contribute to social cohesion? So the entities that we selected that are participating, so I'll give you an example, I'll use one manufacturing entity, which Pavati Plastics, which we came across. Because that entity was promising to impact largely in terms of job creation, to impact in exporting, that we saw then an opportunity as Absa Group Procurement, but also Absa seeing Pavati as a future corporate client. So, which for me differentiate our strategy at Absa, we look at the ecosystem holistically. We procure from Pavati Plastics, but also Pavati Plastics is a client. So that talks to us in terms of client retention and client acquisition strategy. So by supporting them to grow, we are also contributing to Pavati, contributing heavily in the fiscals as they grow, right? So Pavati had its own challenges, but because we were deliberate on our strategy, we jointly shared what the challenges are and co-created the solutions to the challenges, not just throwing money at it, but also throwing the intangibles into it, which also talks now to business development support for infrastructure development. So yeah, the next one, which we've seen Pavati grow. And then the other one that we saw, we've got many, but I'm just using a few. We also then talk about, which I think we will like this one, talk about women empowerment. Two entities that are quite different. Micro VBE, a young girl coming from KZN, sorry to say call her girl, but yeah, she's a lady, a young lady, determined to make a difference and also contribute and changing her own economic circumstances, but not asking for handouts, but saying, I'm going to provide a service and I'm going to be paid for it, but needed to learn some financial lessons. So awarded the tender was awarded to her for courier services initially for point of sales devices, and she's seen grown. But also for me, what I love about this job, what makes me sleep nicely at night, Vuyolwethu, is seeing a seemingly undervalued entity, but also seeing a person who is able to listen, because I think what also SMEs lack is listening and taking advice. MVB for me is a showcase of a business that understood this journey, understood these pains, and saw that if I'm not going to take advice from people who at least have seen two slips out of one, I will then lose my baby. I'll lose my business. And she turned it around. And I'm proud to say, even then what we did with Absa, we introduced her to our value chain partners. And now she's linked with one of our key partners, Altron Bytes, in supplying, expanding her business. Right. So I think for me, those are the places that we've been at. As I said, the program itself has not been easy, and it's not easy. That if it was easy, all of us would be having this topic today. But it is engaging with challenges. So I'm proud to say, out of these entities, we started off with a cohort of 4 entities. We are now at a funded cohort of 26 entities, right? That are deliberately funded by Absa across our value chain. We're dealing at Absa, if I give you a quick anecdotes, just in 2019, we spent 234 million in terms of investing in funding SMEs that are participating in our supply chain. That we are spending about 8.8 billion with Black women-owned entities that are deliberately so that are participating in our space, right? And we've got a stated public statement as part of Proudly SA that our target is to, by 2024, reach 45% of our total spend with Black women-owned entities. And we're tracking well, we're sitting at 35% right now. But it's because we're deliberate and selecting partners that contribute to our business, which also talks about also how these entities have survived with the impact of COVID in our space. We did not cancel contracts for SMMEs because they are providing us, and we are jointly linked in services and strategies that are moving the business forward, right? And we share the pains together, and we celebrate the gains together. So for that's a flavor of our programs, if that's a lighter note, but I think it's quite a concrete note as well.
Absolutely, a concrete and a lighter note. And I think it really showcases how inclusive innovation is really about impact and the shared value that has been a constant theme throughout this conversation. And there's no doubt that 2020 has changed and shifted the way we look at empowering and transforming small suppliers across the value chain. And with the 2 minutes that we have left, I want to invite you to how we move forward with not only ethical but transformative and innovative ESD practice in thinking about as businesses are being built and as the wider ecosystem is growing, as well as new entrants are coming into play. And perhaps two ideas in terms of how stakeholders across the value chain can continue to diversify and as well as empower their supply chains.
Well, let me start with this small anecdote of my motive of life, right? Number one, business and life, you live it in levels, right? You experience your business growth and its success or not in stages. And then finally, success is established in dimensions. So I'll leave you with that. But looking forward to 2021 and beyond, challenges will not leave us. They will always be there. But it's how we confront challenges and be prepared for the next challenge. Taking some time to reflect and look around you. I think SMMEs will always think they are alone, right? You are not alone. The ecosystem is wide, and you've got entities like Absa, who is there to support you. The banking industry is here to support the turnaround of the economy in South Africa, and we will always be deliberate in our businesses. So we are looking for supporting entities even beyond 2021 that drive forward brand SA, but also drive global competitiveness as a country. So I'm inviting SMMEs to say, maybe during this time that we are blessed with to stay back and reflect, right? And inviting captains of industry and leaders like myself to say, how in the way we are going to enter 2021, we must enter 2021 and beyond with an attitude, right, of saying, we came out of a great challenge, but now we are stronger. But we are stronger together. Let us collaborate. Is one, I think we've got 3 seconds left. Let us collaborate than compete, right? I think from this, if I talk back with the supply agreement awards that we come from, what has come out of that also as well is that the captains of industrial space have seen the need for convergence of approaches than divergence of approaches. Instead of chasing for a tick box of a scorecard, let us contribute, and our impact will be then consequential. So, and then I'll say to a business that is out there, don't listen to that is a startup that's thinking tomorrow, the young, especially our youth. Do not think about the challenges and you become despondent. Rise up and say, I've got a solution, right? And walk the passages. Identify with people who will share your vision, but you are the visionary and you need to drive it. Don't say Vusi at Absa and his team are not supporting me. It's what value make me stand up from your first presentation and I want to talk to you. God bless you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. That, ladies and gentlemen, brings us to the end of this consequential dialogue. Indeed, a reminder to collaborate, to innovate, as well as collaborating to impact. It's been an absolute pleasure to engage in how we've mapped out this necessity and the impact and the future of ESD, a transformational tool and strategies that is definitely so relevant and resonates in how we can create shared value for not only this 37 billion rand industry, but South Africa as a whole. This has been Formidable Fridays from myself, Vuyolwethu Dubese, and our Formidable Friday guest today, Mr. Vusi Fele, the Chief Procurement Officer at Absa. Have a pleasant day.
Thank you so much.